Chapter 1, The Day I Died. I died at 26 years old with regret clawing through my chest. The rain that night had been merciless, pounding against my windshield. As I drove toward the hospital after my mother's trembling phone call. Your father took the house documents. Again. Even after years of lies, debts, affairs, and broken promises, she still cried over him. And I still came running. Because no matter how much he failed us, he was still my father. Then came the headlights. The crash. The scream. Darkness swallowed me whole. When I opened my eyes again, I stared at glowing stars pasted onto a pink ceiling. My childhood ceiling. I sat upright instantly. Small hands. Short legs. A child's body. Panic crawled into my throat. No way. The bedroom door burst open. My mother rushed inside wearing an oversized sweater. Her face young and warm and alive. Not tired. Not broken. Not defeated. Lena, she whispered. What happened? Tears exploded from my eyes before I could stop them. Because I knew this moment. I was 8 years old again. 8. Before the gambling ruined us. Before my father's affairs became impossible to hide. Before my mother cried herself to sleep every night. She hugged me tightly while soothing my hair. It's okay, sweetheart. It was just a nightmare. No. It had been 18 years of nightmares. Then I saw him standing behind her in the hallway. My father. Young. Careless. Holding a beer can while looking mildly annoyed. She okay? She had a nightmare. Kids are dramatic, he muttered before walking away. Just like always. My chest hardened instantly. In my previous life, I spent years trying to keep my parents together. This time? I would destroy that marriage myself. Because I knew something nobody else did. My parents were never meant to stay together. Years after their divorce, my father eventually met a woman named Clara, a terrifying doctor who bullied him into becoming a decent human being. And my mother? She later married Adrian Hale, CEO, widower, gentle giant. The man who loved her correctly. Together they had triplet boys who followed me around like ducklings. Everyone eventually found happiness. But it happened after years of suffering. This time I would change that. I looked at my mother seriously. Mom? Yes, baby? You should divorce Dad. The beer can shattered somewhere in the hallway. Good. That was only the beginning. Chapter 2, Operation, Ruin the Marriage. The next morning, my mother acted like the previous night never happened. My father did too. But breakfast was painfully awkward. Dad sat at the table scrolling through his phone while Mom quietly fried eggs. I already knew what was happening. At exactly 8:17 a.m., his mistress would text him. In my previous life, I accidentally saw the message years later. This time, I was ready. Right on schedule. Buzz. Dad smiled slightly while checking his phone. Disgusting. I dramatically climbed onto his lap. Daddy. He blinked. Yes? Who's Candy? His entire body froze. My mother slowly turned around from the stove. What? I widened my innocent little eyes. The lady with hearts next to her name. Silence. Pure silence. Dad laughed nervously. It's nobody. I tilted my head. Then why did she say she misses kissing you? The frying pan clattered onto the stove. My mother stared at him. My father stared at me. I smiled sweetly. He carried me into my room 5 minutes later. What is wrong with you? He hissed. I crossed my arms. You're cheating. You don't even know what cheating means. I remember the red-haired woman too. His face lost all color. Because that affair hadn't happened yet. Not for another year. Fear flickered in his eyes for the first time. Good. Let him be scared. Lena, he whispered carefully. Where did you hear that? I leaned closer. If you make mommy cry again, I'll ruin your life. He stared at me like he'd seen a ghost. Honestly? Maybe he had. That evening, my mother cried quietly in the kitchen while washing dishes. I hugged her waist from behind. Mommy? She sniffled quickly. You deserve better. That broke her completely. She knelt down and hugged me tightly while sobbing into my shoulder. And for the first time in both my lives, I realized how lonely she had been. Chapter 3, The CEO Next Door. 3 months later, my parents were barely speaking. Excellent progress. Dad started staying out later. Mom stopped waiting up for him. The house no longer felt like a battlefield. Just strangers sharing walls. Then destiny finally appeared. Adrian Hale moved in next door. I nearly spat out my juice when I saw him unloading boxes from a black car. Tall. Broad shoulders. Cold expression. Expensive suit. And carrying a tiny white cat in his arms. Exactly the same. In my first life, Mom met him years later at a charity event. This time? I would speed things up. Mom! I gasped dramatically at the window. Our neighbor is handsome. My mother nearly choked on her coffee. Lena. What? I'm helping. Dad looked annoyed. Even better. A few days later, I intentionally kicked my ball into Adrian's garden. Then I marched to his door and rang the bell. The door opened slowly. And there he was. The terrifying CEO himself. He looked down at me blankly. Yes? I pointed dramatically. Sir, I require assistance. He blinked. What? My ball has been kidnapped by your flowers. To my shock, he snorted. An actual laugh. Then he retrieved the ball for me. Thank you, I said politely before lowering my voice. Also, my mother is single emotionally. He nearly dropped the ball. What? She likes flowers and emotionally available men. Lena. I turned around. My horrified mother stood at the gate looking seconds away from death. Meanwhile, Adrian covered his mouth, clearly trying not to laugh. Interesting. In my previous life, he had been much colder. Maybe seeing him before his company became ruthless changed things. Sorry, Mom apologized quickly. She talks too much. It's fine, Adrian said softly. Then he looked directly at her. And for one tiny second, I saw it. Interest. Perfect. Operation Stepdad had officially begun. Chapter 4, Divorce War. My father finally realized he was losing control. Which meant he became unbearable. He started coming home early with flowers. Started pretending to be affectionate. Started acting like husband of the year. Too late. One evening he cornered me in the living room. What exactly are you trying to do? I looked up from my coloring book. Saving everyone. You're 8. You're immature. His eye twitched. Honestly, bullying him was becoming therapeutic. Then his phone rang. I recognized the ringtone instantly. Mistress number 2. I smiled. Aren't you answering? He glared at me before storming outside. My mother watched everything silently from the kitchen doorway. And for the first time, I saw disappointment instead of denial in her eyes. Good. That meant she was waking up. 2 weeks later, disaster struck. Dad lost a massive amount of money gambling. Again. Only this time, debt collectors actually came to the house. My mother looked horrified as men shouted outside our gate. Dad begged her for help. Please, just this once. No. The word stunned everyone. Including me. Mom stood straighter than I had ever seen before. I'm tired, she whispered. Dad looked genuinely panicked. You can't leave me. I already lost myself staying. And just like that, the marriage cracked completely. That night my mother sat beside me in bed. Would you hate me if I divorced your father? I grabbed her hand immediately. I'd be proud of you. She cried silently while kissing my forehead. And for the first time in both lives, those tears weren't hopeless. They were freeing. Chapter 5, The Man Who Stayed. The divorce process began quietly. Dad alternated between anger and desperation. Some days he begged. Other days he blamed everyone except himself. But my mother no longer folded under pressure. And Adrian? Oh, Adrian stepped in so naturally it was terrifying. When our sink broke, he fixed it. When Mom got sick, he brought medicine. When I had a school performance, he showed up before my own father did. Dad noticed. Of course he noticed. One afternoon he snapped after seeing Adrian help carry groceries. You think you can replace me? Dad shouted. Adrian calmly looked at him. No. Then stop acting like some hero. I'm simply helping people you neglect. Oof. Even I felt that one. Dad looked ready to explode. But surprisingly, he didn't. Instead he looked tired. Really tired. And suddenly I remembered something important. My father wasn't evil. Not truly. He was weak. Selfish. Immature. Broken in ways he never fixed. And weakness destroyed everyone around him. That night I found him sitting alone outside with a beer. For once, he looked small. I know you hate me, he muttered. I sat beside him quietly. I don't hate you. He laughed bitterly. Could have fooled me. I stared at the stars. In another life, I tried really hard to keep this family together. His expression shifted slightly. But we were all miserable. He looked at me strangely again, like he always did whenever I spoke too maturely. Then softly, I added. You'll be happier one day too. He scoffed. Yeah, right. You'll meet a scary doctor lady. What? She'll yell at you a lot. He stared at me in complete confusion. I smiled slightly. And you'll love her anyway. Chapter 6, Freedom Papers. The divorce finalized 6 months later. I still remembered the exact sound of the judge's stamp hitting the papers. Sharp. Final. Liberating. My mother sat quietly beside her lawyer, fingers trembling slightly in her lap. My father looked exhausted. Not angry anymore. Just defeated. When the hearing ended, my mother exhaled shakily as if she had been underwater for years. Then she cried. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Just silent tears rolling down her cheeks. I hugged her immediately. "It's okay, Mom." She held me tightly. "No," she whispered brokenly. "It finally is okay." Outside the courthouse, my father crouched in front of me awkwardly. "I guess this is where you tell me I ruined your life." I stared at him carefully. In my previous life, this divorce had happened years later after endless suffering. Now? We still had time to heal. "You made mistakes," I answered honestly. He gave a humorless laugh. "That bad, huh? But I think you can still become better." His eyes widened slightly. Adults never expected children to speak like that. Then Adrian appeared beside us holding an umbrella over Mom. My father noticed immediately. For a second tension flickered in the air. But instead of lashing out, Dad sighed tiredly. "He treats you both well?" Mom blinked in surprise. Adrian answered calmly. "I intend to." Dad stared at him for a long moment before nodding once. Then he looked at my mother. "I really did love you." Mom smiled sadly. "I know. Sometimes love simply wasn't enough." Chapter 7, The Doctor with Sharp Heels. 2 years later, my father disappeared from our daily lives. Not completely. He still called sometimes. Still visited occasionally. But he stopped trying to force the past back together. Which honestly made him easier to love. Mom and Adrian grew closer naturally. Slowly. Comfortably. Like two tired people finding warmth after years in the cold. And then destiny arrived exactly on schedule. At the hospital. Dad had injured his arm after drunkenly trying to help at a construction site. According to him, a ladder betrayed him. According to reality, he was an idiot. I accompanied him because Mom was busy. That was when she appeared. Dr. Clara Bennett. Tall heels. Sharp eyes. Hair tied into a strict bun. Absolutely terrifying aura. She glanced at Dad's chart. "You reek of alcohol." Dad immediately looked offended. "I'm injured. And stupid, apparently." I nearly burst out laughing. There she was. The woman who would eventually change him. Dad glared. "You always this rude to patients?" "Only the annoying ones." "Wow. Stop whining. You're 36, not 6. Dad looked genuinely stunned. I watched in delight. Perfect. Absolutely perfect. As Clara wrapped his arm, she suddenly looked at me. "And who are you?" "His emotional support child." Dad groaned. Clara smirked slightly. "Interesting. In my previous life, Dad once said he fell in love with Clara because she was the first person who never pitted him. Now I could see why. She challenged him. Forced him to grow up. And strangely enough, he needed that. Before leaving, Clara handed him medication. "Try not to injure yourself doing something idiotic again." Dad muttered under his breath. "She's horrible." I grinned. "You're gonna marry her." "What? You'll probably cry at the wedding too." He stared at me like I had escaped from a laboratory. Honestly, fair enough. Chapter 8, Adrian Hale. If Clara bulldozed into Dad's life like a hurricane, Adrian entered ours like sunlight. Gentle. Warm. Steady. By the time I turned 11, he was already part of every important moment. School meetings. Birthday parties. Movie nights. He never tried to replace my father. And maybe that was why I accepted him so easily. One rainy evening, Mom fell asleep on the couch while reading documents for work. Adrian carefully covered her with a blanket. The tenderness in his eyes nearly destroyed me emotionally. Because in my first life, nobody had looked at my mother like that for years. "She works too hard," he murmured quietly. "She's scared of depending on people," I answered. He looked at me thoughtfully. "She shouldn't have had to survive alone for so long." I smiled faintly. "You really love her, huh?" His ears turned slightly red. "Adorable." "I do." "Good." He blinked. "That's it?" I shrugged. "If you hurt her, I'll bury you." Silence. Then Adrian laughed so hard he nearly scared the cat off the sofa. That night, I realized something important. Home no longer felt fragile. It finally felt safe. Chapter 9, The Proposal. Adrian proposed on my mother's birthday. And somehow, I still cried harder than she did. He rented a quiet rooftop restaurant covered in fairy lights. Mom looked confused the entire evening. Then dessert arrived. With a ring hidden beside it. Classic. Adrian stood nervously. Actually nervous. The terrifying CEO who made entire boardrooms tremble looked like he might faint. "I know life hasn't always been kind to you," he said softly to Mom. "And I know trust doesn't come easily anymore." Mom was already crying. "But loving you," he continued shakily, "has been the easiest thing I've ever done." I started sobbing immediately. No shame. None. Mom covered her mouth while crying harder. "Yes," she whispered. Then louder. "Yes." The entire restaurant applauded. Meanwhile, I turned dramatically toward Adrian. You better not disappoint me, sir. He laughed while sliding the ring onto Mom's finger. I'll do my best. And for the first time in both lives, I watched my mother enter love without fear. Chapter 10, The Wedding. Their wedding was small, peaceful, beautiful. Mom wore a simple satin dress and looked happier than I had ever seen her. Not nervous. Not uncertain. Happy. Adrian couldn't stop staring at her. Honestly, it was embarrassing. Dad attended too. Alongside Clara. Yes. Clara. The terrifying doctor and my formerly disastrous father were officially dating. Apparently she bullied him into therapy, stable employment, and healthier habits. Love truly worked miracles. You clean up nicely, Clara told him dryly. Dad looked offended. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. It's the only nice thing you've earned. I nearly choked trying not to laugh. During the reception, Dad approached Mom quietly. You deserve this happiness. Mom smiled softly. So do you. And surprisingly, there was no bitterness left between them. Only acceptance. Only growth. As the music played, Adrian pulled Mom into a slow dance beneath golden lights. I watched while holding tears back. In my previous life, our family broke apart painfully. This time? We rebuilt differently. Better. Chapter 11, The Triplets. When I was 13, Mom announced she was pregnant. Adrian nearly fainted from happiness. I nearly fainted from terror. Then we discovered it was triplets. 3 boys. 3. God has abandoned me, I whispered dramatically. Mom laughed so hard she cried. The pregnancy was chaos from beginning to end. Adrian became hilariously overprotective. Dad mocked him constantly. You look one missed nap away from collapse. Adrian pointed tiredly. She wanted pickles and watermelon at 3 in the morning. Clara nodded seriously. That's survivable. Barely. Finally, after months of stress, screaming, and panic, the triplets arrived. Ethan, Elliot, and Eli. Tiny, loud, chaotic, beautiful. Adrian cried openly while holding them. Mom looked exhausted but radiant. And me? I stared at my baby brothers and felt my heart completely melt. In my previous life, I had grown up lonely. Now I had 3 tiny humans gripping my fingers like I was their entire universe. Life was strange. Wonderful. Healing. Chapter 12, Happily Ever After. Years passed quietly after that. Not perfectly. No family was perfect. The triplets turned the house into a battlefield daily. Dad and Clara argued like enemies in love. Mom still overworked herself sometimes. Adrian spoiled everyone relentlessly. But we were happy. Truly happy. One evening, when I was 17, we all gathered for dinner at our house. The triplets argued over noodles. Dad complained dramatically about Clara's healthy cooking. Clara threatened to throw his dessert away. Mom laughed so hard she snorted. Adrian looked around the table with pure contentment in his eyes. And suddenly, I remembered the life I lost. The miserable apartment. The screaming. The exhaustion. The regret. Then I looked at this life. Warm lights. Full plates. Safe love. Family. I quietly slipped outside onto the porch for air. A few minutes later, Dad joined me. You disappear whenever you get emotional, he noted. I smiled slightly. You noticed? You're still my kid. We sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then he suddenly spoke softly. You know, sometimes I think you saved all of us. My throat tightened. Maybe I had. Or maybe people simply needed another chance to become who they were meant to be. Inside the house, the triplets started yelling my name. Lena. Come help. Ethan bit me. Dad sighed deeply. Never mind. Go deal with your tiny brothers. I laughed. Real laughter. The kind that came from peace instead of survival. Then I stood up and walked back inside. Toward the family we almost lost. Toward the happiness we fought for. Toward the ending we finally deserved. Chapter 13, The Girl Adrian Hated. By the time I turned 18, Adrian had fully accepted that the triplets worshipped me more than oxygen itself. Unfortunately, he also realized something far more terrifying. I was becoming an adult. Which meant boys. It started innocently enough. A classmate named Noah started appearing everywhere. At first he only helped carry my books. Then he started texting me. Then he showed up at our gate holding flowers. Adrian opened the door. And immediately disliked him. You are? Adrian asked calmly. Noah, sir. Why? Poor Noah blinked in confusion. I came to see Lena. Adrian stared at him silently like a disappointed king judging a criminal. Behind him, the triplets peeked around the hallway. Ethan gasped dramatically. A male. Elliot narrowed his eyes. Suspicious. Eli whispered, should we bite him? Not yet, Ethan answered seriously. I buried my face in my hands. Please stop traumatizing my guest. Noah laughed nervously while handing me the flowers. They're pretty, I said. Adrian looked personally betrayed. You accept flowers from strange men now? You married Mom after 6 months. That was different. How? I had good intentions. I stared at him. So does Noah. Adrian glanced at Noah. Debatable. Mom nearly fell off the sofa laughing. Meanwhile Dad, who had come over for dinner with Clara, looked delighted. Finally, he announced proudly. It's Adrian's turn to suffer. Traitor. Absolute traitor. That evening Noah survived dinner somehow. Barely. The triplets interrogated him like tiny FBI agents. Clara asked about his grades. Dad threatened him jokingly with a butter knife. And Adrian? Adrian watched him like a man preparing for war. After Noah left, Adrian sat beside me quietly. You're growing up too fast. His voice sounded oddly sad. I softened immediately. You know you'll always be my dad too, right? He blinked in surprise. Then his eyes became suspiciously shiny. Oh no, I muttered. Don't cry. I'm not crying. You absolutely are. I raised you, he whispered emotionally. You used to eat crayons. That information was confidential. The triplets overheard instantly. You ate crayons? I pointed at Adrian accusingly. This is your fault. Chapter 14, My Father's Wedding. If someone had told me in my first life that my father would eventually become a respectable man marrying a terrifying doctor while crying openly at the altar, I would have laughed in their face. And yet there he stood. Nervous. Sweating. Fixing his tie every 6 seconds. Clara looked breathtaking in a sleek ivory dress. Cold and elegant as always. When she walked down the aisle, Dad actually teared up instantly. I leaned toward Mom. You owe me money. Mom snorted softly. You predicted this years ago. I predict many things. Adrian muttered from beside us, that sentence concerns me. The ceremony itself was surprisingly emotional. Dad's vows were shaky from the beginning. I wasn't exactly easy to love, he admitted honestly. Clara snorted. That's one way to say it. Everyone laughed. But Dad looked directly at her with sincerity. You made me want to become better instead of making excuses. For once, Clara looked speechless. You challenged me, he continued softly. And somehow stayed anyway. Tears filled Mom's eyes. Even Adrian looked emotional. Then Clara took Dad's hands. You were a disaster, she said bluntly. Dad sighed. Romantic. But, she continued quietly, you chose to change. That matters. Dad fully started crying. Honestly? It was embarrassing. But beautiful too. As they kissed, the entire hall erupted into applause. And I realized something important. People really could change. Not because someone saved them, but because they finally decided to save themselves. Chapter 15, The Triplets Strike Back. Living with 3 younger brothers meant peace never lasted long. Ever. At 15 years old, the triplets became walking disasters. Especially together. One afternoon I came home from school to complete silence. Which was terrifying. The house was never silent. I immediately narrowed my eyes. Mom? No answer. Adrian? Nothing. Then I heard whispering upstairs. Followed by a loud crash. I sprinted toward the triplets' room. And froze, paint everywhere. Walls, beds, floor, children, even the cat. Ethan pointed dramatically at Elliot. He started it. Elliot gasped. Traitor. Eli looked at me with paint in his hair. We made art. You made a crime scene. Apparently. They had tried painting a family portrait. The portrait looked like a haunted potato apocalypse. Before I could speak, Adrian appeared behind me, then silence fell. The triplets slowly turned pale. Adrian stared at the destruction calmly. Too calmly, that, he said softly, is paint. Nobody moved. Yes, Dad, Ethan whispered. On my walls. Yes, Dad. On my ceiling. Gravity contributed. I almost died trying not to laugh. Adrian closed his eyes briefly. Then Mom walked in. She took one look at the room. And burst into laughter. Complete uncontrollable laughter. Adrian stared at her in betrayal. You're encouraging them. They painted the cat. The cat looked furious. Clara later claimed the entire situation lowered her blood pressure from laughing too hard. Dad framed the ugly family portrait, unfortunately. Chapter 16, The Truth I Never Told. I always knew this happiness wasn't normal, not because we didn't deserve it, but because I remembered another life entirely. A harder one. A sadder one. And sometimes, the memories still hurt. One rainy night I sat alone on the porch watching the storm. Dad joined me quietly. You do this whenever you're thinking too hard, he noted. I smiled faintly. You notice too much. You're my daughter. We sat in silence for a while. Then suddenly he spoke. You know, when you were little? Sometimes you scared me. I blinked. What? You talked like someone who'd already lived an entire life. My heart stopped. Rain tapped softly against the roof. Dad looked ahead quietly. There were moments I honestly wondered if God sent you back to fix us. I stared at him speechlessly. And somehow, I realized he already knew. Not completely. Not logically. But emotionally. Some part of him had always known something impossible happened. You became different overnight, he continued softly. And strangely enough, that change saved me. Tears burned my eyes instantly. Because in my first life, my father and I spent years hurting each other. Now, we understood one another. Finally, I was angry at you for a long time, I admitted quietly. Dad nodded. You had every right. But I'm not angry anymore. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Then he smiled sadly. I'm glad I got a second chance with you. So was I. More than he would ever know. Chapter 17, The Life We Chose. At 19 years old, I stood in the middle of our loud dining room watching chaos unfold around me. Ethan and Elliot argued over chicken. Eli attempted to feed vegetables to the dog. Mom scolded everyone lovingly. Adrian looked one headache away from retirement. Dad and Clara bickered about salt intake like an old married sitcom couple. And somehow, it was perfect. No screaming. No fear. No walking on eggshells. Just family. Noah arrived halfway through dinner carrying dessert. Adrian still narrowed his eyes every time he appeared. But he allowed it now. Progress. Lena, Noah whispered while sitting beside me, your family is terrifying. That means they like you. Your little brother threatened me with a fork. That means he really likes you. Across the table, Ethan pointed dramatically. He touched her hand. Adrian looked up immediately. Noah. Noah nearly dropped his spoon. Yes, sir? Behave. Yes, sir. Mom laughed into her drink. I looked around the table slowly. At the people I loved. At the people who almost lost each other in another lifetime. Then I smiled quietly to myself. Maybe fate was real. Maybe second chances existed. Or maybe happiness was simply built slowly through difficult choices. Forgiveness and courage. Whatever the answer was, we found ours. And this time, we kept it. Chapter 18, The Day Everything Almost Broke Again. I used to think second chances meant life would become easier. It didn't. It simply meant we handled pain differently. The accident happened 3 weeks before my 20th birthday. Adrian was driving home from work during a storm when another car ran a red light. The phone call came at 11:42 p.m. I still remembered the exact time because fear froze it into my memory forever. Mom answered first. And the moment the hospital mentioned Adrian's name, her face lost all color. The triplets panicked instantly. Dad grabbed the car keys. Clara became frighteningly calm in the way only doctors could during emergencies. And me? For the first time since rebirth, I felt that same old terror from my previous life clawing up my throat. No. Not again. Not another hospital. Not another goodbye. The waiting room felt endless. Mom sat trembling beside me while Dad paced nonstop. The triplets cried quietly against each other. Even Clara looked tense. Finally, after what felt like years, the surgeon walked out. He's alive. The entire room collapsed in relief. Mom burst into tears immediately. He suffered several injuries, the doctor continued carefully. But he's stable. Stable. The most beautiful word in existence. When we finally saw Adrian hours later, he looked pale and exhausted but conscious. The moment he saw Mom, he whispered weakly. You've been crying. Mom started crying harder. Honestly, their marriage was aggressively emotional. Adrian slowly looked around the room. At the triplets. At Dad. At Clara. At me. And despite the pain clearly written across his face, he smiled softly. Everyone's here. Dad rubbed his eyes roughly before muttering. Of course we're here, idiot. That night, sitting beside Adrian's hospital bed, I realized something important. In my first life, our family broke under pressure. This time, we held tighter. Chapter 19, The Future Waiting for Us. Adrian recovered slowly. Painfully. But he recovered. And strangely enough, the accident changed our family in good ways too. The triplets became less reckless. Mom started working fewer hours. Dad stopped postponing important things. Even Clara became slightly softer. Slightly. One evening, months later, our entire family gathered at the beach for my 20th birthday. The triplets built terrible sandcastles. Dad got into an argument with a seagull over stolen chips. Clara recorded it for blackmail purposes. Mom rested peacefully against Adrian's shoulder while watching the sunset. And Noah stood beside me quietly. You're smiling again, he said softly. I blinked. What? You stopped looking like you were waiting for something bad to happen. His words hit me harder than expected. Because he was right. For years, even after changing the future, I secretly feared happiness would disappear if I relaxed too much. Like fate might punish us eventually. But standing there beside the ocean, listening to my family laugh behind me, I finally understood. We weren't surviving anymore. We were living. Noah gently took my hand. Your family loves loudly, he said. I laughed softly. That's one way to describe them. Across the beach, the triplets suddenly started screaming. Noah is holding her hand again. Adrian stood immediately. Dad stood immediately after him. Noah looked terrified. Class deeply. Men are exhausting. Mom laughed so hard she nearly fell over. And for the first time in both my lives, the future didn't scare me anymore. It excited me. Chapter 20, Happily Ever After, again. Years later, I stood in front of a mirror wearing a wedding dress while the triplets cried dramatically behind me. You can't get married, Ethan declared emotionally. You're our sister, Elliot added like that explained everything. Eli looked seconds away from attacking Noah physically. You're abandoning us. I'm literally moving 15 minutes away. That's too far, Ethan whispered. I laughed through my tears. Because somehow, these loud chaotic boys had become some of the greatest blessings of my second life. Mom entered the room next. Still beautiful. Still warm. Still the strongest woman I knew. You look happy, she whispered while fixing my veil. I am. And I meant it completely. A little later, Dad knocked awkwardly before entering. He looked emotional already. This is terrible timing, I warned. If you cry, I'll cry. Too late. He was already crying. Your first school dance nearly killed me, he admitted shakily. And now this? I hugged him tightly. In another life, we wasted so many years hurting each other. Now there was only love left. Only gratitude. You did good, Dad, I whispered. He broke completely after that. Outside, the ceremony began beneath golden sunset light. Noah waited for me at the altar with nervous eyes and trembling hands. And sitting in the front row? My entire family. Mom smiling through tears beside Adrian. Dad holding Clara's hand tightly. The triplets glaring at Noah like protective guard dogs. The people I loved most. The people I almost lost once before. As I walked forward slowly, emotion swelled painfully inside my chest. Not grief. Not regret. Something warmer. Something whole. Because this life, this loud, messy, beautiful life, was worth every fight. Every difficult choice. Every second chance. Noah took my hands gently once I reached him. You're crying, he whispered softly. So are you. Fair point. Everyone laughed quietly. Then as the sunset painted the sky gold, I looked at my family one final time and realized something beautiful. Rebirth hadn't given me a perfect life. It gave me the chance to protect the people I loved before it was too late. And somehow, that became even better than perfection. The end. Chapter 1, The Bride Who Smiled at Her Funeral. The first time Serafina Vale died, the kingdom celebrated quietly. Not publicly, of course. A duchess as influential as Serafina required respectful mourning. Nobles wore black silk. Priests spoke solemn prayers. Women whispered about tragedy behind jeweled fans. But beneath all the false grief lurked relief. The villainess was finally dead. Rain struck the cathedral windows. Violently while Serafina's soul hovered above her own funeral in cold disbelief. Below, her body rested inside a silver coffin surrounded by white roses she hated. How ironic. Her husband remembered the wrong flowers. Duke Adrian Vale stood near the coffin dressed in perfect black. Devastatingly handsome even while pretending heartbreak. His expression looked carefully shattered. Controlled. A masterpiece of performance. Serafina almost admired it. Almost. Beside him stood her younger sister, Lillian Ashbourne, trembling delicately beneath a mourning veil. Sweet Lillian. Gentle Lillian. The sister Serafina protected her entire life. And the woman secretly sleeping with Adrian while Serafina slowly died from poison. The memory returned sharply. Bitter tea. A burning throat. Adrian holding her gently while she collapsed. Lillian crying beside the bed. Actors. Every single one of them. Nobles whispered quietly throughout the cathedral. She was too ambitious. She controlled the Duke. Beautiful. But cruel. Cruel. Serafina wanted to laugh hysterically. Cruel was marrying a woman for power while loving someone else. Cruel was poisoning your wife slowly enough that doctors blamed illness. Cruel was letting her die believing she simply failed to earn love. Yet history would remember Adrian as tragic. And Serafina as monstrous. Typical. Then suddenly, darkness swallowed the cathedral whole. Serafina gasped violently as air crashed back into her lungs. She sat upright instantly. Sunlight flooded across silk curtains. Birdsong echoed outside. No cathedral. No coffin. Her chest rose unevenly as she stared around the room in horror. Her old bedroom. No. Impossible. Shaking, Serafina stumbled toward the mirror. 19 years old stared back at her. Alive. Years before the marriage. Years before betrayal. Years before poison. A knock sounded at the door. Lady Serafina? A maid called nervously. The Duke's family has arrived. Serafina froze. Adrian. Today. In her first life, this was the day she fell in love with him. This was the day destruction began. Slowly, Serafina touched her own reflection. Then smiled. Not softly. Not kindly. The smile of a woman handed a second chance and dangerous amounts of memory. This time, she whispered quietly, I refuse to die for love. Chapter 2, The Villainess Refuses Her Fate. In Serafina's first life, she spent hours preparing for Adrian's arrival. Jewelry. Perfume. The perfect gown. Like a fool decorating herself for sacrifice. This time she chose black. Her maids panicked immediately. My lady, black is too severe. The Duke's family may misunderstand. You should wear blue like Lady Lillian. Serafina nearly laughed. Of course Lillian wore blue, innocent. Girls always wore blue, black suits me. Serafina replied calmly. And perhaps for the first time in either life? She dressed for herself instead of approval. The Ashbourne estate glittered with wealth downstairs. Nobles gathered in luxurious drawing rooms while servants rushed between silver trays and polished marble floors. Serafina descended the staircase. Slowly, conversations paused immediately. Not because she was beautiful, though she undeniably was, because she looked different, dangerous. Across the room, Adrian turned toward her and there he was, the man she once loved. Enough to die for. Dark hair. Sharp jawline. Eyes capable of looking devoted even while lying. In her first life, seeing him made her heart race, now it made her cold. Beside him stood Lillian. Smiling softly in pale blue silk, perfect. Adrian stepped forward elegantly. Lady Serafina, he greeted warmly. His voice still sounded exactly the same. God, she hated that, Duke Adrian. She replied smoothly. His gaze lingered on her black gown. Briefly, you seem different from the rumors. Because in your memories I adored you. Serafina thought out loud. She smiled faintly. Rumors disappoint people when taken too seriously. Something flickered in Adrian's expression. Interest.in. Her first life she chased his attention. Desperately, this time she intended to weaponize it. The afternoon passed through polite conversation and subtle political games. Serafina watched Adrian carefully now that she knew the truth, and once she truly looked. The signs became obvious, the way his eyes softened slightly more around Lillian. The way Lillian unconsciously searched for him in crowded rooms. The quiet familiarity hidden beneath formal distance. Had they already loved each other even then? The realization hurt more than expected, not because she still loved Adrian, because she once trusted them completely. A ballroom announcement interrupted her thoughts. The first dance. Immediately noblewomen straightened eagerly. In her first life, Adrian crossed the room directly toward Serafina. Tonight he still did. Interesting. May I have this dance? Adrian asked smoothly. The entire room watched expectantly. Serafina smiled beautifully, then turned toward Lillian. Oh dear, she said lightly. Wouldn't my sister suit you better? Silence, absolute silence. Lillian nearly choked. Adrian froze briefly. Beautiful. Serafina sipped her wine calmly while nobles exchanged startled glances. Adrian recovered carefully. You misunderstand. Do I? Serafina tilted her head innocently. Lillian looked horrified. Good. For once, let them feel nervous instead. Then another voice interrupted smoothly from nearby. I believe Lady Serafina already promised this dance to me. Prince Cassian Evermere stepped into view. The room practically stopped breathing. Now things were becoming entertaining. Chapter 3, The Prince Who Hated Everyone. Prince Cassian Evermere was feared for 3 reasons. His intelligence, his ruthlessness, and the fact he looked beautiful enough to make people forget the first 2. Tall, dark-haired, perpetually unimpressed with humanity. Cassian carried himself like a man enduring society rather than participating in it. Rumors surrounded him constantly. Cold-hearted prince. Bahiro. Political monster. Serafina adored him immediately. Not romantically. Strategically. Because unlike Adrian, Cassian never pretended to be kind. Your Highness, Serafina greeted smoothly. Cassian's silver eyes studied her carefully. You interrupted something entertaining, he replied. Adrian's expression darkened slightly. My apologies, Serafina said sweetly. I didn't realize honesty counted as entertainment. Cashin laughed softly. Actually laughed. The nearby nobles looked horrified. Apparently no one else found the terrifying prince amusing. Excellent. Then dance with me, Cashin said suddenly. Gasps spread across the ballroom. In her first life Cashin barely acknowledged noblewomen. Now he extended his hand directly toward Serafina. Interesting. Very interesting. Serafina accepted gracefully. As they moved across the ballroom floor, Cashin watched her with unsettling sharpness. You dislike the Duke, he observed quietly. I barely know him. Yet you rejected him publicly. Perhaps I dislike predictable men. Cashin smirked faintly. And am I predictable? No, Serafina admitted honestly. You're dangerous. Most people fear dangerous things. Most people die boring. That earned her another amused glance. Around them the ballroom buzzed violently with whispers. Lady Serafina embarrassed Duke Adrian. Prince Cashin danced with the villainess. The Ashbourne sisters looked tense. Perfect. Serafina intended to ruin expectations this lifetime. No more chasing affection. No more sacrificing herself for people who secretly preferred her sister. If Adrian wanted Lillian, then Serafina would hand him over personally. And this time? She intended to enjoy watching chaos unfold. Chapter 4, Sisters. Lillian cornered Serafina the next morning in the greenhouse. Of course she did. The younger sister stood surrounded by white roses and soft pink silk, looking every bit the delicate heroine society adored. Serafina used to love that about her. Now she only saw danger wrapped in innocence. Why did you say those things yesterday? Lillian asked quietly. Serafina looked up from her book calmly. What things? You implied Adrian preferred me. Because he does. The bitterness almost surfaced before Serafina buried it again. Instead she smiled faintly. Would that upset you? Lillian froze. Tiny reaction. Nearly invisible. But Serafina noticed now. In her first life she ignored signs because love made fools blind. Never again. You're my sister, Lillian whispered carefully. Not an answer. Interesting. Serafina closed her book slowly. And if Adrian liked you? Lillian's cheeks flushed immediately. There it was. Guilt. Oh my God, Serafina murmured softly. You already love him. Lillian looked horrified. It's not like that. Then what is it like? Tears gathered instantly in Lillian's eyes. Weaponized innocence. It worked on everyone else. Not anymore. I never meant for it to happen, Lillian whispered shakily. Serafina stared at her silently. So they truly did love each other already. Even before the marriage. How tragic. How humiliating. How long? Serafina asked quietly. Lillian looked terrified now. We never did anything wrong. Not yet, Serafina thought coldly. Not yet. But they would. She remembered poison too clearly to doubt it. Then suddenly. Serafina laughed. Lillian blinked in confusion. You can have him, Serafina said casually. What? I don't want Adrian. Silence filled the greenhouse. Because this changed everything. In the first life, Serafina fought viciously to keep Adrian's attention. That desperation trapped all three of them in misery. But now? Now Serafina intended to step aside willingly. And perhaps become far more dangerous because of it. Chapter 5, The Engagement Everyone Expected. The royal banquet glittered with expectation. Everyone already assumed Adrian would announce his engagement to Serafina that evening. Noblewomen whispered jealous predictions while politicians discussed alliance benefits openly. Only Serafina knew the future had already changed. She entered the ballroom wearing crimson this time. Not innocent blue. Not morning black. Wore red. Prince Cashin noticed immediately. Planning bloodshed tonight? He asked dryly. Only emotionally. Ah. Noble society's favorite sport. Serafina smirked. Across the ballroom Adrian looked distracted all evening. Worse, his attention kept drifting unconsciously toward Lillian. And now Serafina noticed every single glance. How had she once mistaken this for love? The king eventually raised a glass loudly. To future alliances. The ballroom applauded. Adrian stood slowly afterward. Right on schedule. Nobles leaned forward eagerly. Lillian looked pale. Terrified. Poor thing. She still believed Serafina would be hurt. How adorable. Adrian crossed the ballroom toward the Ashbourne sisters. Every eye followed him. In her first life, this was where he proposed to Serafina. This time? Serafina smiled calmly and stepped sideways before he even reached her. Directly beside Lillian. Adrian froze. So did the entire ballroom. Then Serafina spoke sweetly enough to poison kingdoms. Duke Adrian, she announced clearly. I believe you're standing in front of the wrong sister. Chaos erupted instantly. Chapter 6, The Sister Chosen Publicly. The ballroom exploded into whispers. Nobles stared openly now, scandal spreading through the room faster than wildfire. The musicians faltered mid-song. Even the king looked entertained. Adrian stood frozen between the Ashbourne sisters. For the first time since Seraphina met him in either lifetime, he looked genuinely cornered. Lillian's face had turned completely pale. Seraphina, she whispered weakly. But Seraphina only smiled. Beautiful. Calm. Terrifying. You love her, Seraphina said softly to Adrian. So marry her. The silence afterward became unbearable. Because everyone understood what she was implying. Adrian recovered first. Lady Seraphina misunderstands my intentions. No, Seraphina replied gently. I finally understand them perfectly. Prince Cassian watched nearby with open fascination. Wine glass lazily balanced between elegant fingers. Adrian's jaw tightened slightly. He hated losing control publicly. Good. Let him suffer embarrassment instead of poisoning wives this lifetime. Lillian looked moments away from fainting. We never meant to hurt you, she whispered. That sentence nearly shattered Seraphina. Because it confirmed everything. Not future possibilities. Not suspicion. Truth. They had already fallen in love. Even before the marriage. For one painful second memories crashed violently through her mind. Adrian holding her while she died. Lillian crying beside the bed. The poison burning through her veins. Then Seraphina smiled again. Cold this time. You didn't hurt me, she lied smoothly. You freed me. And for the first time in either life? She meant it. Chapter 7, The Villainess Gains a Prince. After the banquet, noble society lost its collective mind. By morning every newspaper in the capital screamed scandal. The eldest Ashbourne rejects. Duke Vale the younger sister suspected romance, the villainess steps aside. Seraphina read the headlines while drinking tea peacefully. Refreshing. For once she was not the story's tragic fool. The door to the drawing room opened suddenly. Prince Cassian entered without announcement. Typical. Your Highness, Seraphina greeted lazily. Breaking social etiquette already? I was curious whether you survived the kingdom's gossip. And? Cassian glanced toward the newspapers. You appear to be enjoying it. Seraphina smirked faintly. Watching arrogant men panic is healing. Cassian studied her quietly. You truly loved the Duke once. Not a question. Dangerous man. Seraphina looked out the window calmly. I loved an illusion. And now? Now I prefer honesty. Cassian stepped closer slowly. That's unfortunate. Why? Because honest people are usually cruel. Seraphina laughed softly. Then perhaps we'll get along beautifully. Something unreadable flickered in Cassian's silver eyes. Interest. Real interest. Not political curiosity. Not fascination with scandal. Her. In her first life Prince Cassian barely noticed her existence. Now he kept returning. Perhaps fate itself enjoyed chaos. Chapter 8, The Duke Regrets Too Late. Adrian began pursuing Seraphina again. Naturally. Men always wanted what moved away from them. Flowers arrived daily. Invitations. Apologies. Seraphina burned most of them unread. One afternoon Adrian cornered her alone in the royal gardens. You're avoiding me. I'm protecting my peace. His expression tightened. You embarrassed me publicly. Seraphina almost laughed. You poisoned me in another life. What? She blinked once. Ah. Careless. Nothing, she replied smoothly. But Adrian stared at her strangely now. As though sensing something beneath the surface. You've changed. People usually do after disappointment. Adrian stepped closer. You think I love Lillian? Seraphina tilted her head. Don't you? Silence. That silence answered everything. Even now he could not deny it fully. Because somewhere deep inside, Adrian already knew the truth too. I cared for you, he said quietly. The words nearly disgusted her. Cared. Not loved. Never loved. In her first life Seraphina would have accepted crumbs like starving royalty. Not anymore. You should marry the woman you actually want, she replied calmly. And what if I want you? Seraphina smiled beautifully. Then your grace finally understands tragedy. Then she walked away. Leaving Adrian staring after the woman he once destroyed. Only to realize too late she would never belong to him again. Chapter 9, Sisters Speak Honestly. Lillian visited Seraphina during a thunderstorm. No servants. No performance. Just sisters. For once. Rain crashed against the manor. Windows while silence stretched. Painfully between them. Finally Lillian whispered. Do you hate me? Seraphina looked up slowly from her book. The younger girl looked exhausted lately. Guilt hollowed out her soft features. In another life, Serafina might have enjoyed that suffering. Now she only felt tired. No, she answered honestly. Lillian's eyes filled instantly. You should. Probably. Silence again. Then Lillian broke completely. I tried not to love him. There it was. The truth stripped bare. Serafina closed her eyes briefly. Because she believed her. That was the cruelest part. Nobody intended evil originally. People simply loved selfishly. And destroyed others accidentally. He looked at you like sunlight, Lillian whispered shakily. I hated myself for wanting him to look at me that way too. Serafina stared at her quietly. Then finally asked the question haunting both lifetimes. Would you have betrayed me? Lillian froze. The answer mattered enormously. After a long silence, tears slipped down her cheeks. I don't know. Honest. Painfully honest. And somehow that honesty healed something broken inside Serafina. Because monsters lied easily. Humans hesitated. Serafina stood slowly and crossed the room. Then pulled her sister into a hug. Lillian burst into tears immediately. I'm sorry, she sobbed. Serafina held her quietly. So am I. For the first time in either life? The sisters mourned the future that would never happen. And perhaps that was mercy. Chapter 10, The Prince Falls First. Prince Cassian fell in love inconveniently. He realized it during an argument. Naturally. You enjoy provoking powerful men too much. He told Serafina sharply during a palace gathering. And you enjoy threatening diplomats for fun. They deserved it. So did Adrian. Cassian stared at her for several seconds. Then suddenly laughed. God. He was doomed. Serafina fascinated him endlessly. Not because she was beautiful, though kingdoms would start wars over her face. Because she understood darkness without worshipping it. Most nobles played games blindly. Serafina saw the board clearly. And unlike everyone else around him, she never feared him. One snowy evening Cassian finally asked, would you have loved me in another life? Serafina looked genuinely startled. Then thoughtful. Perhaps, she admitted softly. The honesty nearly ruined him. Cassian stepped closer beneath the falling snow. Then love me in this one instead. No manipulation. No politics. No performance. Just truth. Serafina stared at him silently for a long moment. Then finally smiled. Not the villainous smile. Not the social smile. Something warm. Something real. And Prince Cassian realized with terrifying certainty. He would burn kingdoms before letting this woman die again. Chapter 11, Weddings. The kingdom nearly collapsed from shock when both weddings were announced together. Duke Adrian Vale to Lady Lillian Ashbourne. Prince Cassian Evermere to Lady Serafina Ashbourne. Two sisters. Two powerful marriages. One scandalous history. Nobles feasted on gossip for months. Serafina didn't care. Because for the first time in either life, she was happy. Truly happy. Her wedding to Cassian lacked softness but overflowed with honesty. He looked at her like a man who saw every dangerous part of her and stayed willingly. No illusions. No pretending. Just love sharpened by understanding. Meanwhile Adrian married Lillian quietly beneath spring flowers. And strangely, he looked peaceful too. Perhaps people simply belonged with different souls than fate originally assigned. At the royal reception afterward, Adrian approached Serafina privately one final time. You seem happy, he observed. I am. A shadow crossed his face briefly. Regret. Too late now. You know, Adrian said quietly, I think in another life I ruined everything. Serafina's breath caught slightly. Did he remember fragments too? No. Impossible. Still. She smiled gently. Then perhaps this life is your second chance too. And for the first time, Adrian smiled without sadness. Chapter 12, Happy Endings for Villains. Years later, the kingdom remembered the Ashbourne sisters as legends. Not because they caused scandal. Because they survived it. Serafina became a terrifyingly beloved crown princess beside Cassian. Together they transformed the kingdom politically while terrifying. Corrupt nobles into early graves. People still called her villainous sometimes. She considered it a compliment. Meanwhile Lillian and Adrian traveled constantly, rebuilding provinces and managing ducal territories together. Adrian softened around her in ways Serafina never imagined possible. He truly loved her. And this time? No one died for it. One summer afternoon both couples gathered at the royal gardens while there. Children ran laughing through the flowers. Cassian sat beside Serafina beneath a tree, their young daughter asleep against his shoulder. You're smiling again, he murmured. I do that sometimes now. A terrifying development. She laughed softly. Nearby Lillian chased children across the grass while Adrian watched her with helpless affection. Serafina studied them quietly. In another life she would have hated this scene. resented it, mourned herself endlessly. Now, she only felt peace. Because rebirth had taught her something unexpected. Happy endings were not rewards for perfect people. They were gifts given to those brave enough to change the story before it destroyed everyone. Even villains deserved that much. Chapter 1, Rebirth. Rebecca died alone in the house she hated most. The mud walls were cracked from years of neglect, the iron roof leaking whenever it rained. The small rural home smelled of dust, stale smoke, and blood. It was the same house her husband had dragged her into 25 years ago after their forced marriage. And now it would become her grave. She lay on the cold floor, trembling weakly as blood spread beneath her torn dress. The machete wounds burned like fire. Her husband had finally killed her after accusing her of hiding money she did not have. Even in death, he had shown her no mercy. Rebecca stared at the ceiling while tears slid silently down her face. She was not crying for herself. She was crying for Lila. Her daughter had died because of that man. Lila had once been bright and joyful, but life had crushed her spirit after being forced into marriage with a violent drunk old enough to be her father. Rebecca had begged for mercy, but no one listened. Then one night, Lila died from the beatings. Her daughter left behind a little girl named Amelia, but even the child had not survived the cruelty of that family. Rebecca had lost everything. Her womb, her daughter, her granddaughter, her future, even her identity. Only hours before her death, she had discovered hidden documents beneath the floorboards, DNA reports, photographs, investigations. Her husband had found her real family years ago and hidden the truth from her. She had never been abandoned. She had been lost. And somewhere out there, a family had searched for her all these years. Rebecca died with regret burning through her chest. Then she woke up. 25 years in the past. And Lila was alive. Rebecca held her toddler tightly and swore one thing to herself. This time, she would save her child. And this time, she would destroy the man who ruined their lives. Chapter 2, The Escape. Rebecca did not waste time crying over miracles. She knew how dangerous her husband was. Daniel Mwangi looked charming to outsiders, but behind closed doors he was cruel, controlling, and violent. In her previous life, she had stayed because she had nowhere to go. Not this time. This time she had knowledge. That night, while Daniel drank with his friends in the village, Rebecca packed quietly. A few clothes. Important documents. The little gold earrings she once owned. And Lila's favorite doll. Her hands trembled the entire time. Every sound outside made her heart stop. Lila watched silently from the bed. "Mama, where are we going?" Rebecca forced a smile. "To a better life." Near midnight, she wrapped Lila against her chest and slipped into the darkness. Rain poured heavily as she walked for hours through muddy roads. Her slippers tore apart halfway to town, but she kept moving. She remembered what happened in her first life after trying to escape. Daniel had dragged her back by force. This time she would disappear before he realized she was gone. At dawn, Rebecca reached the bus station with barely enough money for 2 tickets to Nairobi. When the old bus finally began moving, Rebecca looked out the dusty window as the village disappeared behind them. For the first time in both lives, she felt hope. Chapter 3, The Search. Nairobi overwhelmed Rebecca. The noise. The crowds. The towering buildings. She and Lila rented a tiny single room in a poor neighborhood using the last of her money. But Rebecca had one advantage. She remembered the address hidden inside the investigation files from her past life. The address of her real family. For days she walked around the wealthy neighborhood, terrified. What if they rejected her? What if they did not believe her? Finally, standing before the large gates of the Kamau estate, Rebecca gathered the courage to ring the bell. A middle-aged woman opened the gate. Rebecca froze. She recognized her immediately from the photographs. Her mother. Older now than in the pictures, but unmistakable. Rebecca's throat tightened painfully. The woman frowned gently. "Yes? Can I help you?" Rebecca could barely breathe. Then little Lila spoke innocently. "Mama, why are you crying?" The older woman's eyes widened. Something about Rebecca's face clearly struck her. And for the first time in decades, a missing daughter came home. Chapter 4, The Lost Daughter Returns. Grace Kamau fainted after seeing the birthmark on Rebecca's shoulder. The entire family rushed into chaos. Doctors were called. Questions filled the mansion. DNA tests confirmed the truth within days. Rebecca was their lost daughter. Her father, Samuel Kamau, cried openly when he embraced her. Her brothers refused to leave her side. For the first time in her life, Rebecca experienced what family felt like. Warmth. Protection. Love. But joy quickly turned into rage when they learned about Daniel. The forced marriage. The abuse. The miscarriage. Lila's death and Rebecca's previous life. Her father's face hardened with fury. "We will destroy him," Samuel said coldly. But Rebecca shook her head. "No." Everyone looked at her. "I want to do it myself." And for the first time, they saw the fire inside her. Chapter 5, A New Beginning. Rebecca refused to remain weak. She enrolled in university despite being older than many students. She studied education and business management while raising Lila. Her family supported her fully. Lila flourished in safety and love. For the first time, Rebecca saw her daughter laugh freely without fear. Meanwhile, Daniel searched desperately for her. But Samuel Kamau's influence kept him far away. Daniel eventually remarried, believing Rebecca would never return. That mistake would cost him everything. Chapter 6, Building the First School. Rebecca understood suffering better than most people. She remembered children in villages unable to attend school because of poverty. So after graduation, she used part of her inheritance to open a small academy. Only 20 students enrolled at first. People mocked her. "She's wasting rich family money." But Rebecca worked tirelessly. She treated every child with kindness. Fed hungry students. Paid school fees for orphans. Within 3 years, her school became one of the best in Nairobi. Then she opened another. And another. Soon, Rebecca Academy Group became known across the country. She had once been forbidden from working. Now she employed thousands. Chapter 7, Daniel's downfall begins. Daniel heard her name on the radio. Rebecca Kamau. Successful entrepreneur. Owner of elite schools. His blood ran cold. He traveled secretly to Nairobi and saw her face on a billboard beside one of her academies. Beautiful. Elegant. Powerful. Not broken anymore. For the first time in his life, Daniel felt fear. Chapter 8, The Pilot. Years passed. Lila grew into a brilliant young woman with dreams bigger than the sky. Unlike her previous life, she was free. She chose her own future. At 19, she announced she wanted to become a pilot. Rebecca cried after hearing it. In her previous life, Lila never even finished school. Now she flew airplanes. Rebecca watched proudly as her daughter trained abroad and eventually became one of the youngest female pilots in East Africa. Every achievement felt like revenge against fate itself. Chapter 9, Daniel returns. Daniel appeared outside Rebecca's office one rainy evening. Older. Poorer. Desperate. He demanded money. Claimed Rebecca was still his wife. But Rebecca only stared at him calmly. The fear she once felt was gone. "You should leave," she said quietly. Daniel sneered. "You belong to me." Rebecca smiled coldly. "No. I survived you." Security dragged him out. But Rebecca was not done yet. Not even close. Chapter 10, Gathering Evidence. Rebecca hired investigators. She uncovered years of Daniel's crimes. Fraud. Land theft. Domestic violence. Illegal dealings. Witnesses slowly came forward. Women he abused. Families he cheated. Rebecca built the case carefully. Just as he once secretly investigated her. Now she investigated him. Chapter 11, The Courtroom. The trial shocked the nation. Daniel denied everything. But Rebecca remained calm. Powerful. Prepared. When she finally testified about the abuse, the courtroom fell silent. She spoke about losing her child. Her womb. Her freedom. Her voice never shook. And when the guilty verdict was announced, Rebecca felt 25 years of pain loosen from her chest. Daniel was sentenced to prison. Chapter 12, Healing. Revenge did not erase trauma. Rebecca still woke from nightmares. Still feared loud noises. Still checked locks repeatedly at night. But now she had family beside her. And she had Lila. Healing finally became possible. Chapter 13, Love Again. Rebecca never expected love after Daniel. Then she met David. A widowed architect with gentle eyes and endless patience. He never pressured her. Never raised his voice. Never controlled her. For the first time, Rebecca experienced safe love. It terrified her. But slowly, she allowed herself happiness. Chapter 14, A Mother's Pride. Lila became internationally recognized as a pilot. Little girls admired her everywhere. Rebecca often watched interviews secretly while crying proudly. Her daughter had survived. That alone felt miraculous. Chapter 15, The Schools Expand. Rebecca Academy Group expanded beyond Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda. Scholarship programs transformed thousands of lives. Especially girls escaping abuse and poverty. Rebecca made sure no child felt abandoned the way she once had. Chapter 16, Daniel's Last Attempt. Even from prison, Daniel tried to threaten her. But Rebecca was no longer powerless. This time, the law protected her. Her family protected her. And most importantly, she protected herself. Chapter 17, Amelia Lives. Years later, Lila married for love. Not force. Not survival. Love. And eventually she gave birth to a daughter. Rebecca held the baby and burst into tears when Lila softly said, "I want to name her Amelia." This time Amelia lived. This time the cycle ended. Chapter 18, The Truth Revealed. Rebecca publicly shared her story for the first time. Women across the country related to her pain. Many finally escaped abusive homes after hearing her speak. Rebecca realized survival itself could save others. Chapter 19, Peace. One evening, Rebecca sat in her garden watching Amelia play while Lila laughed nearby. The sunset painted the sky gold. And suddenly Rebecca remembered the lonely death from her first life. The cold floor. The blood. The regret. She looked at her family now and whispered softly, "We made it." Chapter 20, A Life Rewritten. Rebecca once believed her story would end in suffering. Instead, it became a story of rebirth. The orphan became a daughter again. The abused wife became powerful. The broken mother saved her child. And the woman who once died alone would someday die surrounded by love.